Okay, so today we start talking about digestive system, and it's a pretty large chapter. We're going to talk about, we start with like general anatomy, the activities, the regulation, but a few things. One, probably the most important thing that I start with. Remember, every system, every organ system in the human body, the final goal of that system is to maintain homeostasis, right? So if something changes, that means that organism is out of homeostatic conditions. Blood pressure goes up, goes down, we get cold, we get hot. For digestive system, there are two changes that constitute the change of homeostatic conditions. What are those changes? What is the function of digestive system? Eating. So it's either we're very, very hungry or we just ate. And most of the digestive activities are actually regulated by food. So when we say in endocrine system, there are many stimuli. In digestive system, the main stimulus, food. Yay! But you will learn that food constitutes has a lot of qualities from physiological standpoint, not just nutritional values, many others. So the stimuli for digestive system would be the food itself, okay, such as it's highlighted here, such as osmoreceptors or chemoreceptors, which means chemicals in the food are going to be sensed by the cells in the digestive tract. Osmoreceptors mean salt, and mechanoreceptors mean stretch. Does that make sense? Stimuli can actually, the stimuli that are related to digestive system will involve not only food itself, but also the smell of the food, the sight of the food, the taste of the food. Actually, the thought of the food will be a stimulus that will activate digestive system. And you have to understand, when food gets in there, it activates digestion. Do you understand what I'm saying? Digestive activities. It may not immediately activate the digestive activities of the whole system, but it will go part and part. So let's take a look at anatomy, okay? First, so you have mouth, pharynx or throat, right? Esophagus, stomach, small and large intestine, rectum and anus. Does it make sense? Those parts are separated. Think of the digestive system as the assembly line. Well, in this case, it's kind of not assembly, it's kind of breakdown line, okay? When you start eating, you put the food in the mouth, I presume, and you start chewing, okay? That's sort of a first part of that line. Everything in the mouth that will help you to digest food will be activated. What has to be prepared next? Stomach, because throat, pharynx, and esophagus, they are conduits. They convey food towards stomach. So when food gets in the stomach gets activated, okay, and participates in the digestion. What gets ready next? Intestines. While the food gets in the intestines, they get all cranked up. And obviously, when you chew on something, you swallow, digestive activities in the mouth subside. Does that make sense? When food leaves stomach and enters the intestine, digestive activities in the stomach subside. So think of it as a sort of a conveyor belt. Okay? Does that make sense? Now, the activities of the digestive system, many. You have ingestion, digestion, propulsion, absorption. Think about this. Ingestion, it's in the mouth. What do? We mechanically break down food. We chew, exactly. It's called mastication. Okay? Do we chemically break down food in the mouth? Saliva, of course. It's saliva. My wife always is always angry at me looking how I eat chocolate. I pretty much like swallow the chunks. Okay? She says, hold it in your mouth, let it melt, enjoy the taste. I don't. I just eat a ton of it. Then, so that's mastication. Then, after you masticate it, what do? You swallow. This is deglutition. Okay? This will be propulsion, movement of food. It's not necessarily a digestive activity per se, but you move the food down. Now, in the stomach, what happens to the food? It gets churned. So that's going to be peristalsis and segmentation here. Okay? What else do you have in the stomach? Acid and a bunch of enzymes. So it's chemical digestion again. And then from the stomach, it ends up in the intestine. Intestine will participate in the propulsion, first of all. It'll move. So again, peristalsis. And chemical digestion will occur, mainly with the enzymes. Bile will help out with that. Does that make sense? And then intestine is the main site of absorption. There is a little bit of absorption going on in the stomach, very little. So we can, for the simplicity, we can say absorption happens in the intestines. Okay? When you hopefully absorb everything from semi-digested food, whatever is not digested, whatever is not needed, is leaving the body in the form of feces. That's defecation. So you can see that there are parts of the digestive system that have unique activities, like mouth or anus. Mastication occurs only in the mouth, okay? Defecation occurs only in the anus. And there are activities that you can find in the mouth, stomach, intestine, chemical digestion. Stomach and intestine both do mechanical. Okay, propulsion is esophagus, pharynx, small intestine, large intestine, it's all propulsion. And at this point, I just want you to appreciate that unlike endocrine system, honestly, which is really hard to relive. Does that make sense? You know what I'm saying? You can't say, oh yeah, I had such an experience yesterday, such an outburst of thyroid hormone. I have no idea, you know. Here, you can relate. You either can see this or you can feel this, okay? That's really convenient. Now, how the activities of digestive system are regulated. Basically, it's all reflexes, okay? Not somatic reflexes. What are somatic reflexes? What do they involve? Somatic reflexes. Huh? Which part of the body specifically? Somatic refer to reflexes that are produced by, well, nervous system is the always, you know, like in the middle. But what is the effector of the somatic reflex? Can you name a somatic reflex? Knee jerk. What produces knee jerk reflex? What makes your knee jerk? Muscles. Which muscles? There are three types. One type makes them jerk. Skeletal. Somatic reflexes are reflexes of skeletal muscles. Does that make sense? So sometimes, I mean, if you want to be a dick and scare your physician, you can stop your knee jerk reflex. You can overcome it. He's going to tap on your knee and you just sit still. He will tell you, oh, you probably have neurosyphilis. These are autonomic reflexes. They are independent. Again, you may appreciate them, like salivation. You smell some nice food, you start to salivate, you immediately realize, you know, I salivate. You can't control it though. That makes sense. So as in any reflex, you always start with a sensory stimulus. As we mentioned, it can be sight or smell of the food, or it can be stretching of the digestive organ, or presence of chemicals in the digestive organs. And then this sensory input can end up in the CNS. That's one. Okay? It can be brainstem or spinal cord. And CNS will produce, remember, it's not going to be cortex. Those activities are unconscious. You can't really control it. Okay? So CNS will produce the output as in any reflex. Okay? So this output will increase or decrease mechanical activity, so it will act on smooth muscles. Does it make sense? Make smooth muscles to contract and churn the food or activate peristalsis in the intestine. Or this visceral or autonomic efferents may include glands, secretory glands, exocrine glands. They can be large, like pancreas, or they can be very small, little tiny glands in the intestines and stomach, in the walls of the organs. They will produce different digestive juices. Does that make sense? Now, if you think about it, think of it for a second. You have intestines right here. Spinal cord is here, and it runs all the way up here, and there's a brainstem. Running nerves, kind of sending the signal all the way to the CNS, and then sending it back. Every time there's a little change, sounds like a lot of inconvenience. And it's a huge system. It's a very long organ. So a large part of the reflex regulation of the intestinal activities, a large part is controlled by so-called gut brain or enteric nervous system, it's called sometimes. Essentially, those are nerve plexuses that can be found in the walls of intestine. Pretty much they short circuit the chain of command. It's a local reflex. All the same branches are involved. The only thing is that CNS is bypassed. Look at this. You still have your stimulus, right? You still have sensory nerves. You still have integrative center that will produce the response. Does that make sense? The difference between what we talked about initially with CNS and everything is that in case of local reflexes, CNS is not involved. It all happens locally. That makes sense? So I want you to understand two big concepts. First, the concept of autonomic reflex, kind of a reminder. Sensory input, transmission to CNS, integration of the info in the CNS, which is going to be brainstem and spinal cord, and CNS will produce the motor output, which will activate smooth muscles and exocrine secretory glands, which is kind of excessive. Exocrine is by definition secretory. That makes sense. So that's one, just big concept of autonomic reflex. And second, I want you to understand that digestive system can be regulated by both reflexes that involve CNS and reflexes that involve local plexuses, the gut brain. Does that make sense? Good. Now, terminologically, appreciate the terms like, and we'll get to that, we'll repeat them multiple times. Mastication, chewing, deglutition, swallowing, peristalsis. When you squeeze the toothpaste out of the tube, this is peristalsis, okay? Segmentation. Segmentation is demonstrated here. So this tube represents intestines, okay? And contraction of smooth muscles break down the bolus of food into smaller chunks. So segmentation improves the mixing of food with digestive juices. Are we clear? Do you have any questions? Go ahead. Deglutition. Okay? So the digestive system is essentially a hole in your body. Very convoluted one, but it starts in the mouth and ends in the anus. Okay? And all organs that comprise that hole, that comprise that channel, are called primary digestive organs. And that channel is called alimentary canal. So, just, you can look there, but just think, which organs comprise alimentary canal? Come on, let's go from here. Mouth, then throat or pharynx, then esophagus, then stomach, then you can small intestine, large intestine, rectum, anus. Well, you can break down small and large intestine. I wouldn't put anus as the separate organ, you know, probably not that specialized, but you can probably separate rectum from large intestine. Okay? So you have to know this, guys. The secondary digestive organs, they secrete into the alimentary canal. So let's have fun and figure out what are secondary digestive organs. Liver, okay, produces bile that goes into the small intestine. What else? Pancreas, pancreatic juice goes into the small intestine. What else? Gallbladder doesn't produce anything, it stores. What else? Nope. Technically, I mean, it's kind of part the canal. It's sort of a dead end, you know. Doesn't produce anything. It's just like sitting there. Liver was named. It's right at the entrance. Salivary glands, of course. Salivary glands. You actually produce a lot, like you release a lot of fluid in your alimentary tract. As far as I remember, you produce about 1.5 liter of saliva a day. Yeah, it's a lot. Now, different parts of alimentary canal are covered with the visceral peritoneum, just telling you, okay? When during the development, some of the organs are covered with peritoneum, okay? Liver is covered by peritoneum. Parts of the large intestine and parts of the small intestine are covered by peritoneum. On the other hand, some of the parts of alimentary canal during the development pushed away from peritoneal cavity and become, we call them retroperitoneal. Does that make sense? Okay. What else should I say? I don't really like to talk about mesentery, but we have to mention it because it was recently acknowledged as an organ. You're talking about anatomy being static. Like a year and a half ago, like Anatomy as a Science, they said mesentery is a separate organ. It's pretty much a membrane that holds intestines together. I'm going to ask my wife to give me a dead mouse. She works with mice. Next class, next Monday, I'll bring a dead mouse. We'll open it up, and you will see the digestive system. If she would work with monkeys, it would be much more fun, I know. So pretty much all intestines are connected by the membrane. Okay, this membrane has a lot of lymphatic vessels, blood vessels, nerve endings, which supply the intestinal wall. Lymphatic system is especially important there because, as you can imagine, together with nutrients, we consume a lot of crap, and that crap has to be taken care of by immune system. So it has to be drained into lymphatic system, and macrophages will do their job. Also, fat absorption involves lymphatic system. That's another important thing. Does that make sense? And when people become fat, especially men, mesentery is the part of the structure in the abdominal cavity that accumulates fat together with a lesser and greater omentum. If you would, like men, they develop beer belly. That beer belly comes from the fat accumulation specifically in the abdomen. It is more characteristic for males rather than females. Females accumulate mostly subcutaneous fat, well, in the first place. And it was shown that abdominal fat in the mesentery and fat in the menta, it is a bad one. Let's put it this way. The more of it you have, the more risk of cardiovascular disease, for instance, to develop. So, thing to consider. A majority, the big portion of alimentary tract, let's put it this way, shares the same structure of the alimentary tract wall. We're going to talk about it now so we can spare it from, later conversation. Don't have to go in such details. So this, what you see here, of course, it doesn't apply to mouth, doesn't apply to pharynx. It partially doesn't really apply to esophagus. This starts pretty much at the stomach. 4 layers. The innermost mucosa. So in this image, mucosal layer will be this. Okay? From the side of the lumen, and everybody understands the word lumen, empty stuff inside of the tube. So from the lumen side, luminal side probably is going to be in English, there is an epithelium. Okay? The next layer to the epithelium is lamina propria. You can see it right here. Lamina propria is the layer of areolar connective tissue which contains a lot of immune cells and lymphoid tissue. And then a thin layer of smooth muscle, which is called muscularis mucosa. So muscularis is muscle, mucosa, mucosal layer. That makes sense. The main function of mucosal layers, you can imagine, is secretion of mucus. And not only mucus. Some digestive juices are produced in those glands in the epithelium. And of course, epithelium is extremely important for absorption. Does that make sense? Then there's submucosal layer. Consists of the connective tissue and harbors a lot of blood and lymphatic vessels. So when mucosal layer absorbs nutrients, those nutrients can diffuse into the blood vessels and can be distributed all around the body. And then third layer will be muscularis externa, outer layer of muscles. Here on this image, it is shown right here. So that arrow that I just put shows you the thickness of the muscularis externa layer. It's going to have at least 2 layers of smooth muscle, longitudinal and circular. Circular layer would wrap around the intestinal tube, while the longitudinal layer will go along. When circular layer contracts, it will assist in peristalsis. Does that make sense? You see how peristalsis and of course segmentation will be able to break bolus of food in pieces. Longitudinal layer, when it contracts, it will shorten the tube. Think about it as you pull the sock on the foot. You know how you sometimes, if the sock is really, really long, it's really hard to go like put the whole thing on. You want to squeeze it first into the shorter version of the sock. Put it on and then stretch it out. Okay? And the outermost layer is the most boring one. It is called serosa. It's pretty much simple layer of simple squamous epithelium, which produces serous secretions, which prevents organs from rubbing against each other. Watery-like secretion on the surface. They decrease friction. Yeah. Does that make sense? We're going to run into those layers on many occasions, and you will become much more comfortable with those. Understand the basic functions: mucosa, secretion and absorption; submucosa, providing space for blood vessels. That's all it does. Muscularis, peristalsis and segmentation; and serosa, preventing friction. Any questions? So, first organ, mouth. Oral cavity. This kind of produces a lot of confusion, what we should call oral cavity proper and buccal cavity. So if you think about it, you can use your tongue to investigate the mouth. You have 2 sub-chambers in your mouth. First of all, you have vestibule or buccal cavity. Buccal cavity, it's the space between the gums and the teeth. Sorry, between the cheeks and the teeth. Does that make sense? Lips, cheeks. So like sometimes people put the chewing gum under the lip, right here, on top of the gums, you know what I'm talking about? That's going to be, they put it in the vestibule or in the buccal cavity. the oral cavity proper is whatever behind your teeth. Behind from the front or behind from the sides. So your tongue, when you close your mouth, your tongue is entirely inside of the oral cavity proper. Does that make sense? Do you see the anatomical difference between those? Good. So the function, mastication, and that's mechanical digestive activity, and salivation, which is chemical digestive activity. That makes sense. The roof of the oral cavity is palate. There's a hard palate, which consists of maxillary and palatine bones, and the soft palate, of which the most notable part is the little growth here called uvula. Okay, when I was a kid, I thought it's some bad growth, and I really wanted to rip it out. So if you would open your mouth and look in the mirror, you're going to see some distinctive anatomical features in your mouth. Of course, gums and teeth, well, in teeth. Tongue, by the way, the strongest muscle in your body, relatively to the size. Uvula. The frenulum, inferior and superior labial frenulum. So word-wise, labia refers to the lips. So lower lip is the inferior labia, labium, and upper lip is superior labium. So inferior labial frenulum is the little structure that connects gums and the lower lip. Then lingual frenulum, the structure that connects the anterior portion of your tongue to the bottom of the oral cavity. And then you have two arches, palatoglossal, and palatopharyngeal. So palatoglossal, palatine and tongue. Palatopharyngeal, palatine and pharynx. Does that make sense? And I believe this picture shows you the sick person. You're going to have palatine tonsils. Usually not that white, not that easily noticeable. That makes sense. Those tonsils are essentially your first line of defense against anything that you may consume, or if you are a mouth breather, CAM, respiratory infections can also find their death on the palatine tonsils. That makes sense. Tongue contains a lot of taste buds that are located on different papillae. You have foliate papillae, folds, fungiform papillae, the most numerous, the anterior portion, anterior 2/3 of the tongue, and valate papillae, back there. Does that make sense? I teach taste in AP1, but if you want sort of a, so I'm not asking this in the exam, but there are 5 types, right? We have sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami, right? Umami is steak, cheese, tasty stuff. Salty taste is mediated entirely by sodium flowing into the taste cells and gustatory hair cells and depolarizing them. Sour taste is hydrogen ions getting into the cells and depolarizing them. And then sweet, bitter, and umami, they activate second messenger systems of various sorts. So they bind to the receptor. Say sugar can bind to the receptor, activate G protein. You're now familiar with G proteins. And then there's all kinds of stuff. It can be phospholipase C, it can be phosphodiesterase. The point is, in the end of that second messenger activation, you're going to have depolarization of the cell. Does that make sense? I'm more curious if you can tell me what is the evolutionary purpose of these tastes. For instance, what's the evolutionary purpose of salty taste? Why do we need to know which food is salty? What do we get from that food? More general? So again? Electrolytes. All kinds of salts and electrolytes. Sweet. What do we get from the food? Energy, carbohydrates. Sour. Until we discovered lactic fermentation, it was the sign that food went bad, really. We shouldn't eat it. It turned out not that much, but bitter, poison, umami, steak, cheese, protein-rich foods. Okay. You know what we're going to do? We're going to wrap it up because in no way I can talk about salivary glands in 5 minutes. Now we're going to synchronize this